Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for another Outer Limits review. Today I will be talking about Season 1, Episode 7, O.B.I.T, directed by Gerd Oswald and starring Peter Breck, Jeff Corey, and Alan Baxter. This episode, O.B.I.T, is an average episode in my opinion. There's a few things that I really like about this episode. The plot is very interesting and it's definitely still relevant today. And although the episode is a bit on the slow pace side, it definitely keeps you interested in the mystery behind the story throughout the whole episode. On the downside, as I mentioned, this episode is very slow moving and the climax is also a bit predictable from a modern standpoint. To be fair, maybe when this episode was made, it wasn't so easy to see where it was going, but from a modern perspective, the payoff was only okay in my opinion. Also, the acting and direction is just kind of okay in this episode. I didn't think it was necessarily up to the normally very high above average standard that has been the case with other Outer Limits episodes so far. So we start with a man sitting, monitoring some kind of computer device, which we'll learn is called O.B.I.T, the title of the episode. And he's definitely monitoring people, as we can tell. The problem is all of a sudden we see something, we're not sure what it is yet, some type of creature, strangle and kill this man. So this is the setup for the episode, which brings about an investigation from the government, from a Senator Orville, who we're introduced to in the next scene. We're also introduced to a Byron Lomax, who's important to the plot, and he's one of the men in charge of things on the base where this murder happened. It's like a military base, I believe. And we're also introduced to the wife of another doctor that will be important to the plot. Her name is Barbara Scott, I believe. And you can also tell that she has kind of an odd relationship with Lomax, although we're not sure exactly what kind of relationship at this point. So at this point, we actually start having an investigation, and we get a lot of scenes of people testifying in rooms, which is somewhat interesting, but also gets somewhat repetitive at the same time. It's one of those things where the show wants to explain everything instead of actually showing us some of what's happening. So, first we get to hear from a man named Mr. Wyatt, and he's the one who found the body. We get a little more information on the case, but a lot of this felt like filler, in all honesty. We also get testimony at this point from a doctor, and this he has a dramatic story behind him, which is fine. But basically, this is just to go to show what O.B.I.T can do. He says these letters that he wrote, nobody should have been able to know about them, but because of O.B.I.T, some people knew his story. So at this point, Lomax takes the stand, and he's asked about the social aspects of the base. And he tries to kind of cover it up, but you can tell that morale hasn't been very good. It turns out there have been a lot of functions that people aren't attending. There have been a lot of problems. People are just not that happy. But he's very reluctant to say anything about O.B.I.T. He says it's top secret information. We do get to learn a little bit more at this point about what O.B.I.T is and how it works. Things like that. We learn that it picks up wavelengths, people off signals, at least from the best I could understand, and it can actually keep track of a person, pretty much any person, as we'll see there might be an exception or two to that. So we can see that this machine is making people on edge because obviously they know they're being watched or monitored. So this can cause a lot of trouble. So at this point, we get to hear from a Colonel Grover. Yet more testimony. Like I said, although all this is interesting, it is starting to get a little repetitive where someone just takes the stand and answers questions without us actually really seeing a whole lot visually of what's happening. It's just people talking, explaining things. So at this point, the colonel testifies, and we learn that Barbara is the wife of a Dr. Scott. He's a man that was overseeing a lot of things on the base, but it turns out he's not supposed to be physically or mentally all that well, but we don't know more about that yet. We are also being told that Dr. Scott is not available to testify, even though he was supposed to, but the senator's not having any of this. After getting a lot of resistance, he does get to go visit this Dr. Scott, who's a pretty interesting character. I would have liked to see him fleshed out a little more. So he basically tells the senator that he saw a monster when he was watching O.B.I.T, and that nobody believed him, but the senator believes him, and it turns out that that's why Dr. Scott has been put like in this It's like some kind of place because he's not supposed to be totally mentally stable. But the doctor's very reluctant to testify because he says, he might not be safe, he might not have safety or be protected. But the senator kind of convinces him that the way he's living, kind of in hiding from the problem, is no way to live. So he gets the doctor to testify, which will be important. So at this point, we get a scene that I have kind of mixed feelings about. We see Barbara on the O.B.I.T screen. She's being monitored, and then we get to see the monster again. Now, I'm not sure if we were supposed to deduce from this scene exactly who the monster was or not. It was very obvious to me at this point. I kind of like this scene because we get to see the monster again. We get to see him eliminate a witness. We actually get to visually see something actually happen in action. But on the other hand, I felt the monster reveal here right after seeing Barbara made it very obvious what was going on. So I could go either way on this scene. So we go back to the case again as we're getting close to the climax of the episode. We learn that the O.B.I.T machine is actually being used not only at this base, but out in the public as well. And we learn this from the colonel, who says he's basically addicted to watching it at this time. So at this point, we get testimony from Dr. Scott. He says that he saw a picture on O.B.I.T of Lomax and his wife Barbara. He suspected more was going on, between them basically. So he became obsessed with starting to watch her every move on O.B.I.T, which put a lot of strain on their relationship, which is understandable. But this also basically leads, putting all the facts together, to the conclusion, because he was having a hard time picking up Lomax on O.B.I.T, it is revealed that Lomax is this monster all along. So Lomax basically flips out, makes a speech, which came off as very, very theatrical, but it did put some energy and life into the episode, so that was good. But it did feel a little overdone here. The whole episode's very calm, and then this guy just kind of goes crazy, which was interesting. So we literally get to see him turn into the monster for a few seconds before he disappears. And that's basically it for O.B.I.T. So like I said, there's some good things about this episode. It brings up a topic that's still relevant today. It was ahead of its time a little bit in that regard. And the episode is an interesting mystery. On the other hand, like I said, it's very talky and a bit repetitive, a bit padded in a few places too. Some of the testimony I don't think we necessarily really needed. But overall, O.B.I.T is an average episode in my opinion, and I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. I would say if you like these kind of very talky, somewhat interesting, suspense mystery stories, you may like O.B.I.T. But if you're someone who likes a little bit more action and a little bit faster pace, O.B.I.T may not be for you. So 2.5 out of 5 for O.B.I.T. And as always, thank you very much for watching.